Welcome to episode number 124 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. This is Jason Finelli, the gaming expert at Fox PHL The Gambler, both competitive gaming and general gaming, and we have a fantastic episode here for you, as always, on Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Episode 124 welcomes an old friend back to the show, MEAC Commissioner Sonja Stills, to talk about the latest and greatest that they have going on in competitive esports. In our second act, we will talk about the E3 dropouts of the week and the kind of ripple effect that that's having across the industry, at least as far as reaction is concerned. And then finally, we'll have a solemn memorial for the 4 games that were discontinued, or announced that discontinuation is coming, I should say, just this week, and how I feel about those on a 1 to 4 scale. Maybe we'll rank them, maybe we won't, I don't know. But there are 4 games that have either been announced as being discontinued or, getting ripped up or what have you. It's been an interesting week, but let's not waste any more time. Our first segment here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 124, is one of my favorite things to do on this podcast, and that's welcome back a returning guest. Do you remember over the summer I spoke to the commissioner of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and she's going to kill me if I don't get that right, about their budding esports initiative, and that initiative is coming to a head this year. They're going to have an esports tournament coinciding with the big postseason basketball tournament. So to talk about that and to talk about the league, the season so far, we have the commissioner of the MEAC, Sonja Stills. Sonja, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Jason?
I am wonderful. It is great to be talking with you again about this initiative of yours. Great to see collegiate esports or competitive gaming thriving down there in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. First and foremost, though, I have to talk about the basketball schedule that will be the tournament that will be hosting this esports event. Yeah. You may sneak 2 teams into the tournament this year. I see Morgan State is undefeated in the conference and at home, but they're 2 games behind Norfolk State in the overall record. Howard is sneaking up in there. Their overall record's not so great, but that conference record cannot shake a stick at. And South Carolina State is there. So, What are you thinking right now, if you had to guess where this may end up, if you're allowed to guess, being the commissioner, honestly?
I'm neutral, but, you forgot University of Maryland to Shore, men.
Oh, I did?
Yes. They are doing outstanding right now. They are on a run because right now they're 6-1 along with Howard at the top.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Good. So they look, it's anybody's tournament. You never know. I think coming into the season, kind of Norfolk State men were like the favorites, and I think the Norfolk State women as well, or Howard's women. And so everything is shaking out a little bit differently as we go. So no telling what it's going to be like.
No telling. And you're right. I have to admit something here. I brought up the standings. I was all ready to go, and I didn't realize I was looking at the women's standings, which is why Howard was up top. And that's why I forgot Maryland Eastern Shore. No disrespect to Maryland Eastern Shore, much disrespect to my own vision. So let's get into what is going to be going down here in conjunction. Press release came out last Monday, the 23rd, the MEAC to host their first ever esports championship at a basketball tournament. The regular season runs from the 23rd to February 12th, Sunday, February 12th. And then
Correct.
February 13th, we'll see the start of postseason play. That's in the
Correct.
esports,
Yes.
right? Not okay. And the 4 games that you're playing are Smash Brothers Ultimate, Mario Kart 8, Overwatch 2, and Rocket League. All 4 of those games will feature in this tournament?
Yes. Yes. We're really excited. We kind of allow the students to kind of dictate which games that we're going to
Cool.
go towards. And so, yeah, so we're ready. We're ready. We're ready for them. It's really exciting to be able to have this in-person event, as we look back almost 3 years ago when we started this. So yeah, we're just really, really excited to be able to showcase it during the basketball tournament.
Can you see a clear, looking back at when you started this initiative to now, can you see a clear line of growth and how it continues to grow even now as things are getting more quote unquote normal with more things still opening up in the later days, the waning days of this pandemic? Are you starting to see people either discover your league and think, oh, I could be a part of that, or start to champion it to their friends like, hey, this is a thing that our schools are doing, nobody else is really doing?
Yeah, so I've seen the growth from where we've been. It's getting more organized on the campuses. And I think from where we started from scratch, HBCUs have been behind. Before COVID, they were already behind. And so getting our institutions, our teams more organized, having the esports centers and rooms, we're coming up there. We still have a ways to go. But to see where we are at this point in the competitiveness of our student athletes, I call them still student athletes,
That's what they are.
is tremendous. And so we see the top teams, which is Howard and Morgan, consistently, dominating the conference play. But as we grow and make more awareness, we see more teams being more organized and coming aboard.
Now, this is the first time you'll do a live activation in conjunction with one of your other, the big sports postseason tournaments, right?
Yes.
Do you expect that will shine quite a spotlight on this and maybe garner even more attention, perhaps even outside of your schools?
Yeah, I look forward to that. I anticipate that because it was important to have the esports in a place that people have to walk through.
Sure.
So we're doing a vendor fest event, and so when you walk into that, you're walking right through the
that's so smart,
right?
I love it.
So it will help bring more awareness to what our schools are doing as far as esports is concerned. But also when you see the youngsters in high school or elementary school see, oh, wow, HBCUs have esports programs. I may want to go and look at that. But just the awareness that we can do with teaming up esports with the basketball tournament is going to be, I think, a tremendous thing for our institutions.
I would agree. And this being one of the biggest events, I think, of the conference's year, I think that's an easy thing to say. To have that running in conjunction with it is huge. So I'm looking here at the press release as well, and it mentions a pretty sizable prize pool for each of the games. Smash Brothers at $1,400, Rocket League at $1,050 total, Overwatch at $1,750, and the top 3 finishers for $650.
Yeah.
Do you run into issues with the NCAA as far as offering? Where does that? I guess esports isn't recognized, so you can get away with it. Where's the loophole?
Exactly, it's not recognized by the NCAA.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a while before I think the NCAA would get around that. It's like people keep saying, it's the wild, wild west out here right now when it comes to esports. So I think it would be some time before that would happen. I think we would have to all the collegiate institutions would have to come under one umbrella. And until that happens, I don't see the NCAA touching it, particularly because there's a lot of money tied to it.
Now you mentioned true. You mentioned other conferences coming in under one umbrella and making its own thing. Have you started to see seeds of that? Have other conferences reached out to you and say, "Hey, how are you making this work? What is it that you're doing?" Or other schools maybe outside of the MEAC? Has there been any interest to you about what you're doing here and how maybe they can make it work as well?
Yeah, so we've communicated with, of course, the CIAA, in which our young lady who is has been working with us for a couple years. It started as an intern, Charity Phillips Neptune. She is actually helping them put on their esports
Excellent.
championship during their basketball tournament.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, so which is awesome. So I think we're starting to now collaborate more, but I think we're still at that grassroots
Sure.
level right now, because we still, like I said, we're still behind the times. So we still have to get everybody playing on the same level playing field. Everybody's got to be on the same platforms. And right now, we're still playing cross platforms because
Okay.
everybody is not, everybody don't have a esports lab. We don't have, everybody don't have a coach and all
That's
that stuff.
fair.
So until we get everybody up on a level playing field, I think then we would be able to bring everybody together under one umbrella.
Yeah, that I hadn't even thought of that actually. That uniformity
Mhm.
is pretty key, even in something like, I mean, they offer cross-platform play, but that
Right,
still there are advantages to playing PC versus console and just
right.
things that now you don't really have to worry about with Mario Kart or
Mhm.
Super Smash Brothers. That's on one
Yeah.
console, not a big deal. But Overwatch and Rocket League definitely surfaces there, so that makes a lot of sense. So each school now, does they have their own esports lab in the MEAC, or you're still working? That's what you're talking about there. You're still working on
Right.
that.
So currently, we have about 5 schools who have, out of the 8, who have
8.
esports centers.
Cool.
And so we still need to find 3 more to build on the campuses. And you can tell the strength of the program based on based on who has the technology, the infrastructure,
Sure.
to be able to keep things rolling.
Now, when you say that on paper, it kind of sounds, for lack of a better term, unfair. The teams
Mhm.
with the big labs do better, but it also speaks to if the schools get a lab, they start to improve. And if everybody has a lab at that point,
Yeah.
then the real, for lack of a better term, competition can begin.
Right.
Again, speaking to that level playing field, that uniformity, which makes, again, a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And just talking with that is when you have the lab, everybody's together in the same
that's
room,
right.
being here, and so that is tremendous if we can get everybody on the same level playing field.
Have you had Have you had a chance to sit in on any of like the labs as they're scrimmaging or practicing or anything like that? Have you had a chance to go in there and just see the players play in their element?
I have not yet. I
Okay.
have not yet. But I've been there when they're putting the labs together. I
Oh, that's
went to
cool.
Coppin State, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, boxes are coming in, and I'm looking and to see where they came from, where they started
Hmm.
to where they're going at this point with the setup of their arena, or their center. And then Howard recently just kicked off their I won't say inaugural, but they opened up their lab recently in the
Cool.
fall.
I,
And so it's tremendous accomplishment for our institutions.
I feel like Howard was the one we were speaking about in the summertime. I remember you saying they were about to open. So that opened without a hitch. Everything's working.
Without a hitch,
Excellent.
it looks beautiful. I received the pictures from Deborah Johnson, who's leading those efforts, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing, and I'm
I
just so happy.
People say if you can go back in time, what would you change? I would say have my parents meet 10 years later so I could take advantage of all this and have a blast. It sounds so cool hearing these colleges building these esports facilities from a young kid who was playing Super Mario at the age of 3. It really is heartwarming that these kids will be able to do this for as long as they want, basically. Now, then again, the industry as a whole is starting to see a bit of a tumultuous time. Let's say things are starting to slow down. As is that, or do you pay attention to the overall industry and kind of gauge what they're doing versus what you're doing, and maybe if you see them start to ramp up, you'll start to ramp up again, like, or do you focus on what's in front of you?
I'm focused on what's in front of us, really, because like I said, we're still grassroots. So, I'm looking at how we can improve the conference and the conference play and how we, deliver services. And again, how we generate revenue that's going to help get me 3 more esports centers.
That's fair. Yep.
So yeah. So yeah, that's definitely where our focus is.
Sure. Now, one last question to get you out of here. Easy one. If you were to add a 5th game, like you have the 4 games here, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, Overwatch, and Rocket League, if a bunch of kids came to you from across the conference and said, hey, we have an idea for a 5th game, how would that process work in becoming part of the official implementation? Would you want to trial run like a small tournament between a couple of teams to see how it plays out? Would you want to, like, obviously, I don't know if the ESRB is involved. You can't use games that are rated M. Like, where does that all fit?
So basically, working with Charity Neptune, she really engages with the students. So on Discord and kind of see, okay, what do you all like? What are you all playing? Because it'll change based off of who is really involved.
Sure.
If the students are consistently playing. So if we're doing it, we'll start it at the beginning of the season.
Okay.
And see how it goes. And then if we have good participation and enough schools who are participating, enough teams, then we can add it into the championship lineup.
That's cool. So, hey, if you're a fan of competitive gaming and you want somewhere to look that you might not have thought of, keep an eye out for the official MEAC Esports Twitch page. They're broadcasting all the time of the current regular season schedule. And then the Smash Brothers and Rocket League Championships will be streamed live as they're happening from the Norfolk Scope Arena down there in Virginia on March the 8th, I believe. It's from 1 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Smash Brothers on March 8th. And Rocket League will be streamed from 1:30 to 5, it sounds like, on March the 9th. So if you want some Rocket League and Smash Brothers action at the grassroots level, that's the place to look. And it's all thanks to the MEAC Commissioner, Sonja Stills. Thank you so much again for joining us. I look forward to the continued growth of this league, and I fully expect the MEAC to be at the forefront when the rest of college sports gets off their backside and realizes that esports are actually pretty cool. Sonja,
appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Jason.
Coming up after the break, we'll talk about some interesting news concerning E3 2023 and who may or may not be there. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 124. Another great big thank you to Sonja Stills, the commissioner of the MEAC, coming in to talk to us about the esports tournaments that they will be having in conjunction with the big end-of-year conference basketball tournament on March 8th and 9th down there in Norfolk. That's really, really cool that gaming and college basketball will be in the same building for folks to enjoy on those days. I think it's a really cool idea. It's a great way to get them exposure, and I hope that it certainly works out for them in the long run. They really do seem like they're pioneering something here, because I don't hear of many other conferences getting behind esports or competitive gaming like this. I hear about schools having their own little communities within the school themselves. But as far as an entire conference being involved, it's really, really cool. Keep an eye on the MEAC. Commissioner Stills doing some fun things down there, especially for fans of gaming. But now we turn our attention to something that's a little less fun, a little more head scratching, a little more perhaps concerning, and that's regarding the news with E3 this week. So if you hadn't heard the news with E3 this week, the three major players, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, were reported an exclusive report by IGN saying that the three of them would not be involved with E3 2023, which returns in June. As you can imagine, the first response by most on the internet was, huh? Followed by, oh, E3's dead, because that's how the internet works these days. They hear something and they immediately assume the worst and then pile on, and then it was E3's dead. It's been dead for years. It's not relevant anymore. I don't know why it's still around. The whole nine. I have made my opinion on E3 and where I stand on it very, very clear. I think that there is always a place for a major industry conference like that when it was business oriented. Now that it's included the public, it's getting a little out of hand with ReadPop. That's a whole different story. But I do think there's still a place ultimately in the industry for an E3 style event. We haven't had one since pre-pandemic. As much as people love the summer announcements, they're way too spread out. They need something more centralized, more streamlined, and within the span of maybe a week or so. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. The main news here is that Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo will not be participating in E3 this year, which got a lot of people's dander up, as you can imagine, on both sides of the argument. It's not that big of a deal versus E3 is, has one foot in the grave and the other one's going in. So where do I stand on this? Ultimately, it is a blow. It is a blow to E3's resurgence. If they were trying to come out strong in their first ever show and prove that they can get back to what they were, not having the three main system publishers will be a chore. However, when you start to think about the situation that they find themselves in, it might not be that much of a big deal. And what I mean by that is, consider who we're talking about here. Xbox, for years pre-pandemic, I want to say 2016 to 2019, maybe 2017, 2019, were doing everything, all of their E3 activations in the Microsoft Theater just down the street, or just down the pavilion, whatever you want to call it, from the Los Angeles Convention Center. They weren't in the West Hall or South Hall. They didn't have a booth. They had their conference in the theater on Sunday, and then all of their press demos were in those kiosks that were on the stage for the E3 press conference. So they basically just took over the Microsoft Theater for 2 days, 3 days, and that's where they held all of their stuff. So Xbox technically was already out. PlayStation also was already out, because in 2018, their booth was just a big theater with a bunch of floor space and maybe 4 demos. In 2019, they didn't have a booth at all. They were gone. So Sony not being a part of E3 is not unprecedented either. Where it gets weird, where it gets admittedly very weird, is Nintendo. Nintendo not being a part of this is weird. They've always had giant outlandish booths with, first it was they built new section of New Donk City for Super Mario Odyssey. Then there was the greatest E3 booth I've ever been in, the Breath of the Wild booth, where they basically you went through a door and you were in Hyrule, and then you went out of a door and you were out of Hyrule. It was absolutely bonkers. 2019, I believe, was for Sword and Shield. Wasn't quite as blown out, but still had a pretty cool section there. But they had a decent size booth. Not having that in West Hall this year will be different. That's the part I think I missed the most. However, there are 2 major caveats to that have made me think that maybe it's not as terrible as I was originally dreading. And here's the first one. The first one is, they can still do their E3 Direct. They can still have the Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern, Nintendo E3 Direct with whatever they want to announce for the end of the year and the beginning of 2024, however they want to position it. That's fine. They can certainly still do that and be part of, with major quotes, E3. Just like E3 2021, the one that was all digital, they capped it off. Their E3 Direct was the last event officially sanctioned by E3 and the ESA. There's nothing stopping them from making this video and just airing it in the E3 window, even though they don't have a booth. That makes a lot of sense to me. Will they do it? I don't know. Obviously, I don't have any inside information there, but it would make sense to me if they did something like that, especially since there are now rumblings of a Nintendo Direct coming next week. It is the first full week of February, after all. They tend to air these Nintendo Directs around this time, be it this coming Wednesday or the Wednesday after, the 15th, who knows. Part of me is hoping that it's the 8th, so we can get out of the way before all the Super Bowl nonsense, but we'll see. However, I don't know if that means there will be one in June. The timing lines up. But another thing throwing a wrench into that theory is the fact that the whole reason that they're not going to E3 this year is that they don't think they will have enough to show for the end of the year, which opens up a whole other can of worms about Nintendo in this particular year. What are they doing? What's going on behind the scenes? Is there anything after Tears of the Kingdom this year for them? Is that their entire year? Where's Pikmin 4 fall into all this? Is Advance Wars finally coming out? There's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of questions and concerns about their portfolio, and it makes sense. But those concerns, a side effect of that is them not being at E3, which then causes concerns about E3. Ultimately, I think that of the three, Nintendo is the biggest blow. But then you start to think of other trade shows, your Gamescoms, your Tokyo Game Shows, shows that happen outside of the E3 bubble and have major, major success. So because the three of these, while very weird, will not be a part of the show, it does not mean that the show itself will not be successful. Just because Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft won't be on the show floor doesn't mean that the Xbox Series X, the PlayStation 5, and the Nintendo Switch won't be, because that's where we'll be seeing these games. Third parties have an opportunity to show off, show up, show off, and show out, right? If Capcom goes in there, buys a booth the size of Nintendo's, and blows out Street Fighter 6, maybe with some whatever DLC's coming or whatever games they have coming after that, and they blow that out, that's a great opportunity for them. Square Enix can do the same. Activision Blizzard, well, if Microsoft has their way, they may be owned by Microsoft by then, so maybe not Activision Blizzard, but they didn't have a booth anyway. So again, another not very big loss. But this opens the door for not only big third-party publishers, but for indie publishers to get in there and maybe have a little more space than just those little makeshift cubicles that they put on the fringes of the major halls on the show floor. Ultimately, I think that the name E3 still carries a lot of marquee weight. Right? I think outside of this industry, they hear E3, they hear Electronic Entertainment Expo, and they think, oh, this was the industry's thing. They haven't done it in 4 years. Let's see what they have. There may be some concern when they hear that the big three won't be there, just like there was with the rest of us. But it does not necessarily make for a death knell for the show. And again, I know I am perennially and forever glass half full when it comes to E3. I will always be glass half full when it comes to E3. I will always champion it. I will always be behind it. I know that. Is it biased because of my experiences there? Probably. But I do know that I do think that there is a place for this. So there is a little bit of bias here at the end of the day. But ultimately, when that show ramps up, I do think that the national attention or the media attention from outside of our bubble will be there. And if the main companies, Xbox, PlayStation, and Sony, are not going to take advantage of it this year, then it's up to the third parties to then fill that gap. Will they? I don't know. That depends on how much faith they have in the ESA and ReedPop, who are running things. I don't have that sort of insight to, really know what's going on there. But I'll tell you one company that I think could really benefit from a huge showing at E3. And it's a little out of left field. It's a little off kilter. But considering the initiatives that they are presenting now, the things that they're doing in the gaming space, I do think it's a company that could, with a big enough booth, hey, we're here for the long haul, this is all the stuff we're doing, acknowledge us in the video game space, go full tribal chief Roman Reigns with it. Netflix. I think Netflix could really show off their mobile library with a decent sized booth at E3 to sort of fill that void. Now, are they going to fill the void of a Nintendo or a Sony? No, of course not. They're never going to be able to do that. They should not aspire to do that. What they should try and do is get a booth, fill it with mobile devices, iPads, Android devices, phones, whatever, and show the library of games that they have on this service. The Valiant Hearts sequel from Ubisoft just dropped this week. There are more announcements coming in the weeks leading up to the conventions when they start, I'm sure. There were games that were announced at the end of the year for the beginning of this year. Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is excellent on mobile thanks to Netflix. Kentucky Route Zero, excellent on mobile thanks to Netflix. That opportunity is there. All they have to do is take it. If Nintendo is going to leave open that booth space and Netflix wants to fill it, makes sense to me. Hey, if Netflix wants to do their own, stage show, maybe a 15, 20-minute Netflix Direct or whatever they want to call it, that seems like a good idea. And all they have to do is put it together. So do I think that Netflix, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo not being at E3 is a death knell? No. I do think E3 can survive without them, and Gamescom and Tokyo Game Show are two examples of proof of that. However, if they don't come back in 2024, is there an issue? Probably. But also, can the third-party companies, including some new players, make up for their absence? Absolutely. Absolutely they can, at least to a degree that is quote-unquote acceptable or keeps the conference relevant. Will it ever be the same without at least one of the three of them? No, obviously I'm not going to say that because that would not be true. But are all three of them necessary to have a good show? For the first year back, I would say no. I think it's still possible. They just have to foster the relationships that need to be fostered, that being the ESA and ReedPop. Get the big third-party publishers in there with some marquee games and blow it out. If they could do that, then I think E3 will be in a good spot. Ultimately, we won't know until the end of June, end of that week in June. For now, all we can do is cross our fingers and hope that they're going to figure that out. And if Netflix wants to get on the phone, it was my idea, damn it. So maybe they'll give me a little pat on the back for it. But anyway, coming up after the break, we will say our solemn goodbyes to a handful of games that were confirmed to be shutting down, if not soon, if not immediately, then very soon, I should say, just this week. 3 big titles, plus a 4th that is shutting down technically, but we'll get into that in the next segment. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 124. Another thank you again to Sonja Stills, who started the show with a look at the MEAC competitive gaming scene. Going to hold a tournament right in conjunction with the college basketball tournament for the conference. That's very, very cool. Thank you again to the MEAC Commissioner, the old Commish, for coming to see the show. Last segment, we talked about where E3 may stand with Sony, Nintendo, and Xbox not showing up. But this segment, unfortunately, we have to get sad. We're going to get a little sad in this segment here and say goodbye, say our goodbyes to 4 games who will cease to be as we know them sometime in the near future. Some sooner than others, and all of them we hardly knew ye, but yet our time with you is at an end, and we must say our goodbyes. The first one is probably the one that makes me the most sad personally, as it's the one I spent the most time playing of the 4 of them. And that is the pro wrestling battle royale known as Rumbleverse. You may recall that in April of last year, episode, I want to say 80 or 90, somewhere in that regard, you would think that I would know when these things happened, or at least have it ready for you as I start to talk about it. But no, why would I do such things? Why would I make things easy for myself? Instead, I'm just going to click around like a big dummy and see if I can figure out when these folks were on the show. But I am talking, of course, about CEO and co-founder Adam Boyce and Chelsea Blasco from Iron Galaxy. Wow, forgot the name there for a second. They came on to talk about the Rumbleverse and the history of Iron Galaxy and stuff like that. Had a fantastic talk with them back before the game came out. And unfortunately, that's all we're going to hear from it. Rumbleverse is being shuttered in February. In this month, it'll be gone by the time March 1st hits. And that's sad. That really is sad. I thought they had something there. I really thought they had an interesting, unique idea for the Battle Royale format, where instead of just, mindlessly shooting people or, just following the circle shrinking, it was the pro wrestling bent, I thought, was a pretty solid idea. So to see it fall by the wayside is... it sucks. I thought there was, like I said, a lot of potential there. I thought they could have explored some partnerships with either, All Elite Wrestling or WWE or NJPW or any of the wrestling leagues. Never even got a chance to do that. I thought that the mechanics of the game were fun. I thought being able to pile drive someone off the top of a building was amazing. The name Grappital City is something I will never forget. Just an absolutely fantastic name for a fictional town, especially one centered around professional wrestling. Kudos to whoever came up with that name. Like I said on the show, they should receive a nice fat bonus for coming up with that. But yes, unfortunately, Rumbleverse will not see a full year, or it may see exactly a full year on the market before it falls by the wayside. And I hope that somehow folks are able to keep that thing going, private servers or what have you. But unfortunately, that does not seem very plausible, does not seem very possible. And Rumbleverse will be shuttering very soon. So that's a sad state of affairs there. I wish Iron Galaxy well. I hope it does not affect them too much in the near future, and I look forward to whatever it is they're doing next. Hopefully it will, soothe the loss of Rumbleverse for some of its biggest fans. There was a lot more reaction on the on Twitter too to that game shutting down than I thought would happen. A lot of diehard fans sad to see that game go, and I am too. I'm not going to sit here and say I was a diehard fan, but I played it a good enough amount to really appreciate it. So I am sad to see it go. The second one I'm going to speak about is actually one that I did not really play at all, and not for lack of want, just lack of time. There are too many live service games to play. There are too many games that aren't live service that need to be played, and because of that, this one fell by the wayside for me personally. and that is Knockout City, the multiplayer competitive dodgeball-esque sort of game where you played as teams and you were playing. It was actually dodgeball. I don't know why I said dodgeball-esque. You were on teams, I think, of 6, and you were running around this city playing dodgeball with one another. Very cool concept, very interesting idea, but another game that unfortunately is falling by the wayside, which is interesting because I believe they just announced a collaboration with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fairly recently, like as recently as last week. I feel like it was Bebop and Rocksteady, actually. Now, this game isn't shuttering until June, so perhaps there is more in that pipeline to get out before the game actually shuts down for good, hence why the announcement's happening now, and they're going to wait until June to actually do it. But yeah, another one that I thought was doing pretty well considering the critical response to it and the fact that it was on its 9th season of content. That's a pretty long time for a game to be out. So another live service game falling by the wayside. That kind of sucks, you know. A lot of people work on those games. A lot of people put their heart and souls into them. Then they finally launch them. Launching a game is difficult as it is. If you know nothing about how video games are made, please know that every game that actually hits your shelf, no matter how buggy or glitchy it may be, is a small miracle. And the people who make these games should be lauded for doing so. But aside from that, just to see another live service game, multiplayer game, kind of like fall on its butt, probably through no fault of their own, just people who either weren't interested or were interested but had other things to play and kept pushing it back, and now it's too late. I may try and give it a whirl before the game shuts down in June, just to say that I was able to give it a shot and share my thoughts on it. But I don't know that I'll be able to do that, and that's the whole problem anyway, right? Like, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to sit down and play that game, and the whole problem was nobody else could either. So I hope, just like with Iron Galaxy, I hope the studio behind that game isn't too heavily affected by it, and I hope that they bounce back and whatever they come up with next knocks our socks off, because I love when games knock my socks off, and I look forward to seeing whatever's going on with that studio in the future. Our next one is one that is the most shocking of the three, if I'm being honest. I had heard that, you know, revenue was good. It was making money. It was popular. People were playing the crap out of it. They pushed the crap out of it like last year, right when it first launched, I believe. Another game that didn't make a year. But again, the success that this one seemed to be having and the ideas that they had behind it, seeing this one falter is very weird, and that would be Apex Legends Mobile. The mobile version of Apex Legends is being shut down, but there are some weird little caveats around this particular situation that I think bear discussing at least a little bit. The first one is that there was some innuendo or some reference to the fact that the reason for the shuttering is not necessarily for performance reasons, but because there is some sort of issue behind the scenes between EA, the owners of the IP Apex Legends, and the developers of the game, who are Tencent / Lightspeed, the massive company in the East that are, you know, buying video game companies up and you know, just becoming this giant monolith of games. Seems to be some sort of, you know, cross wires or some sort of disagreement that may be causing this game to shut down. A strange thing to hear, honestly, but especially considering, you know, they had specific characters coming to the mobile version and only to the mobile version, at least for the time being. But it is very strange to see that game shut down again because of the potential spat between publisher and IP owner, developer and IP owner. And what kind of fed those flames was, I believe the CEO of EA, Andrew Wilson, was talking about the future of that game. And he mentioned that Apex Legends may be coming back to mobile or may not be done on mobile. It's just this particular game, which makes me wonder if Perhaps they have another version of the game in the pipeline, something closer to the actual game itself, maybe even the actual game itself, and they're just porting it to mobile as well somehow. It's just an interesting out-of-nowhere decision for a game that I thought was pretty popular. We'll see what happens in the future. See if Apex Legends makes its way back via some other form onto the mobile devices. But for now, it's done. And there's really nothing we can do about that except cross our fingers. So those were the 3 games that were actually announced to be shutting down. They're done. They're not coming back. But a 4th game also kind of, sort of was shut down, but not, more of a focus change, let's call it. And that was the fact that 343 Industries, some news came out of there that they're basically pressing the reset button on Halo, which is fascinating. They had this engine called Slipstream that was, highly touted, top of the line, going to power Halo for years. And then it came time to make Halo Infinite, and it was struggling. It was falling behind. Apparently there are some modes, some multiplayer modes for Halo Infinite that are just sitting on a drive in the 343 studios waiting to be shared or waiting to be uploaded, and they can't because the engine doesn't fit them or isn't compatible with them or something of that nature. It's a very strange idea that the Halo engine would not be able to handle Halo anymore, but here we are, right? Maybe that was the whole point. It was delayed to begin with. Maybe that's the point. It didn't release until it did. Who knows? But Halo Infinite, Halo seems to be going back to scratch under Unreal Engine 5 inside 343 Industries there. And honestly, I think it's the right call. As ballyhooed as Halo Infinite was when it first launched, after a while, people really started to sour on it. Lack of content, limited, for the most part, multiplayer modes, things that were promised that never happened. Just a lot of discontent around that game, even despite its pretty strong launch. So we'll see what happens with that reboot in the future. I hope it works out for them. I really do. Halo is a pillar video game franchise, one of the greats. And to see one of those fall by the wayside through a mixture of their own fault and not their fault kind of sucks. So I'm hoping that Halo can get itself a big reboot and a big reintroduction as soon as possible. Maybe it can happen alongside Gears 6, as the Coalition also announced they canceled whatever internal project they were working on, and what's next for them is Gears 6. Pretty disappointing. I would have liked to have seen a different game from the Coalition, but maybe we will after they end this new trilogy or whatever it is that Gears 6 will be doing when that comes out. So if you were a fan of Rumbleverse or Apex Legends Mobile or Knockout City or Halo as it is now, your world is about to change, and maybe not for the better for you, because those games are done. They are going to be shut down, or in Halo's case, the reset button's being pressed, and everybody's going to move on. So it sucks that that's happening. You never like to see games be shut down like that, but if no one's playing them and it's just costing money to operate them, then you have to make the hard decision, pull the plug, and try again with the next game and hope that that's just as good, if not better, than the one you would put out before. But I have a feeling that all of these games will have a soft spot in people's hearts based on those who really enjoyed them in the small time that they had with them. And with that, we are at the end of episode number 124 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented as always by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM Philadelphia, and iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcasts. As I say every week, if you are listening to these words right now, it means you made it to the end of my show, and I am forever grateful that you stuck around with me for this hour-long show. I hope you were entertained. I hope you were educated somewhat. And I hope you come back next week with questions that I am happy to answer. Ask me on my social media, Big Man Finelli, or email me at jason@jasonfinelli.com, which is right in my Twitter bio as well. Always looking for feedback, comments, questions, whatever you want to do to make this show better for you. That would be very much appreciated. But Until then, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have an even better week right behind it. And we will be back next week with more of the latest and greatest in video games here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Goodbye, everybody.